Hey, what's shaking? Like I said, I'm going to be talking about some of the hacks that we're doing around the problems with VR, right? So VR is awesome. It's actually probably the best take that we've had on this particular platform. There's been many different attempts to do this in the past, but what we're doing is trying to fill in some of the gaps within the experience with some experiments that I'm about to show you, and how these experiments kind of relate and apply to projects that will involve the concerns of the public, maybe the ever-evolving landscape of experience education. Okay, so that's me. I was younger, thinner, more well-rested. Um, and I work at a company called Isobar. So we're a digital consultancy firm, and we help our clients invent their futures through the considered application of technology. And specifically, I work through the Isobar Now Lab. So we're a culture of thought, first and foremost. Basically, it's a formalized idea of a good idea can come from anywhere, but we've manifested into physical labs around the world. I work in the one in New York, and where we can make, break, and rebuild technology in order to fulfill on these great ideas. Ideas like breathalyzer activated keys, which call a cab if you're too drunk to drive home. Brainwave powered mood boards that suggest better purchases to suit your mood. Systems to help elevate the performance of professional athletes, both on an individual level and as part of a team. Right, so every day I get to walk into the office and I have the pleasure of working with these wonderfully talented nerds. And we're trying to fulfill on the promise of VR. And what do I mean by that? When we think about virtual reality, the guiding light, the North Star for us is the holodeck. If you guys recognize this thing, great. For those of you that don't, this is a fictional technology, unfortunately, but virtual reality seems to be a great gateway to be able to achieve this experience. And what it does, it allows groups of people to be able to step with their full bodies in virtual reality and experience simulated real locations around the world, or in this case, around the universe, without the limits of time, space, or deterioration, right? So what we're trying to do is find interesting hacks so that people can build experiences based on the stuff that we come up with that are both accessible and scalable. And what do I mean by that? Accessible in that we don't want to come up with solutions for these particular notions that require a heavy investment in hardware. We want to make it so that somebody that's able to code is able to recreate these experiences. And we might want to make it scalable. So it's free out to everybody. These ideas and the ways that we're approaching them are free to everyone. We want you to be able to plug them into your existing VR projects and evolve them and then spread it out into the world, right? It's kind of like a pay it forward situation, but maybe without Haley Joel Osment. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is a shared experience. This is something that we worked on like a year and a half ago. It was a research collaboration with MIT Media Lab's Fluid Interfaces group. What happens when you walk into virtual reality, or rather put a headset and teleport it into virtual reality, is that you are experiencing a place in silo. So if you come from a room full of people, you put on the headset, at least previously, you put on the headset and you are alone in this experience, right? So we started, I think this was like our maiden voyage. Sorry, let me do that. We started working on how can we kind of hack the engine side of things so that we don't need to have any additional technology for people to be able to collaborate and experience real places at the same time. So now we're able to collaborate within the virtual world from the comfort of our physical ones, share our observations as they happen, right? And the reason why this is so important is that we learn and collaborate better through the observations of other people within the same space, right? Otherwise, things move slowly. It's kind of like when you do a video chat, you can't share a whiteboard sort of deal, right? And we're trying to mitigate that within the virtual space. The next problem is the invisible man or woman. So when you jump into VR again, you're kind of greeted by this fantastical created world, but unfortunately, all you can see is a recreation of your hands, or the representation of where those hands exist, right? You know what I'm talking about. And often for me, those hands are really small because I have massive banana fingers. And you look down and the rest of your body's missing, right? And there's this disconnection between you and the environment that you're in. Now, there are a lot of companies that are working to try to fix this problem, and they're usually trying to work in kind of more of a hardware space. So, again, we're trying to make this accessible and recreatable by people that are just solo studios within a garage. So, how are you able to contextualize other parts of your body? Well, you gotta excuse us. I know this looks a little hokey, but this was well before the puck was available. We would have preferred to have a photo of that thing, but I just wanted to show you that, yeah, we were trying to hack within this space. So, not the most elegant solution, but it did actually come up with some decent results. And now we have this. We're able to, okay, so this is Beryl, who's 6 foot tall. She's wearing 6-inch high heels. I have no idea how she walks in them, but she's also able to kick a virtual reality soccer ball. That's great. But unfortunately, all you can see is her foot, right? It's tracking just another part of her body. So we can take what we, okay, that's a huge penis. Better. Okay, so we can take what we know about human physiology, the median proportions and ratios of the human body, and everything that basically we plugged into inverse kinematics so that we can do motion mocap and recreate 3D bodies in a virtual space, and then apply that to the physical markers that we already have. So here on the left, we have the standard system, which is marking 3 points on your body, right? And it's kind of, people have made attempts to make approximations on what happens with your elbows. The only problem is this is always going to be quite difficult if you're using like minimal amounts of trackers. It's because of the amount of movement that your wrist has, right? So on the right, we have the updated system. So with the addition of 2 extra trackers, we're able to approximate different areas of the body so that you can see where the knees go relative to your height and everything else. And that looks a little bit like this, Mr. Meeseeks. Right? So just the application of that, of 2 pieces of hardware and some clever design and code, we're able to accomplish like a full body approximation of what could happen in the world. Now, imagine this coupled up with a shared experience, and now you're able to see what other people are doing within the virtual space, their context within that world, and your effect on the world by anchoring yourself in it through the rest of your body. Okay, so the next thing is perfectly imperfect. So I'm running through this really fast because I've only got 15 minutes. The next thing is the perfectly imperfect, right? So about a year and a half ago when the first commercially available VR headsets came out, you know, we'd see a lot of things that looked like this, and we were required to create that for our clients as well. They're recreations of objects within our world, within the limitations of our understanding of what the technology could achieve, and also the limited computational power that was available at the time. So, great, but we've come a long way from there, and yeah, the people have created really good ways of actually reinterpreting the world around us. It's often the confines or the walls that confine us that become the canvases for our creativity. But what we thought was like, how could we use these same limitations in order to be able to capture actual moments in reality, right? And actually plug them back into VR. So we get something that, okay, we did this like a year and a half ago. We get something that kind of looks like this. This is a rooftop in Chicago, and it's made up of different scanning technologies. But the point is that we're attempting to capture real world locations. So you can see here that we've actually done, it's actually an amalgamation of different types of scanning technology. Firstly, photogrammetry, which was developed by the US military to map geometric data while visiting other countries. And it's great for long distances and organic landscapes, right? But it's pretty terrible at anything up close. The next thing is LiDAR, and that's built for architecture and planning, and it's great for man-made structures, but terrible for anything else. And this captures, so this is around capture as opposed to creating something to make it feel real. It's capturing the world with all of its flaws, all of its beautiful flaws that make it feel like part of your actual reality. So why is this important? I'm going to throw up a couple of images here, and feel free to holler out if you know what these images are, and bonus points if you can tell me exactly what's happened to them. Anybody?
Blown up by the Taliban.
Yes. Okay, So this is one of the Bimiyan Buddhas. For those of you that don't know, there was one that was 53 meters high and one that was 38 meters high. I work in metric. I'm from Australia. And this was located in Afghanistan, just outside of Kabul, I think. And it's a 1,500-year-old statues that were carved out of a cliff face that took 100 years to carve out, right? But in an instant, this is what happened. On March 2001, the local Taliban decided to do this, right? Conflicting religious ideology has gotten in the way of something that was a central part of our history. It's painful to look at. I see your face. Sorry. And this is what's left behind. Okay, another couple of examples. On a lighter note, here's Jesus in a crown of thorns. Right? Anybody know what happened here? Okay, great. So for those of you that don't know, this is Eche Homo, Behold the Man by Elias Garcia Martinez, right? This was painted in the 1930s. It was a fresco in a chapel in the south of Spain, I believe. And a well-intended, you can see it's kind of deteriorating here, but a well-intended individual decided to take it upon themselves to be able to bring it back to its former glory. Things don't always go ahead as planned. So this is what it looks like today. Right, an argument can be made that this image is far more famous than the actual original one. I don't want to make that conversation. It's just going to go down in a wormhole. But you can see this has kind of affected our history as well. And also this guy's life that has to explain it to the rest of the world. So last thing that I've got as an example is something a little closer to home. Anybody? There we go. Cool. So this was a collective art space where people from around the world would actually come in, paint walls both on the exterior and interior, and people from around the world would come in to experience it. Now, thanks to real estate development and gentrification, this is literally being whitewashed. So overnight, all this art had disappeared, and now this is what it looks like today. Pretty shoddy, right? But it's not just man-made issues. It's not just our advancement that actually get in the way of our history. It's also environmental issues that actually might get in the way, which might actually be man-made, I don't know. And what it all boils down to is it's about preservation, right? Like, how can we now capture these spaces and these places, these points in history, these seminal parts of our lives that brought us to where we currently are, in a way that doesn't deteriorate over time and is not affected by societal differences, not affected by the environment or any other external means, right? So we're trying to get ahead of it using what we've learned from that hotel rooftop experiment. It was actually a project that we did for Wyndham. Full disclosure, was to sell timeshares. But we're actually using that to get ahead of this. So this is the Heidelberg project. It's much like 5 Points. It's a open space art project outside of the city of Detroit. You can see a lot of these buildings are rather decrepit. They're kind of coming down a little bit, and they've been deemed by the city as unsafe. So what we're doing is actually capturing, using the same technologies and the same methodologies, but a little bit more evolved because we understand a bit more, to capture these spaces for use for future generations to be able to see within virtual reality. So we want to capture it in a volumetric scale. Here you'll just see like a point cloud and how we're kind of just, these are initial scans that need to be scrubbed a lot, but soon we'll be able to just plug this into the same system that we created for the Wyndham project, and voila, people from around the world are able to experience the same thing in its former glory. Cool. So it's not just about the places, but it's about the people that made these places so important. We're kind of toying around with the idea of scanning human beings and seeing what we can do with them. You'll see here kind of a quick progression, sort of timeline of the scanning technologies over the last 8 years. So here on the left, we have 2008. It's a $1,500 scan, looks pretty hokey, and there's patches throughout the whole body. On the right, we have like a $50 scan that we just did with a depth sensor, and it's getting a little depth sensor attached to an iPad, and it's getting a little bit closer to, you know, we're shooting for photorealistic on everything, but we got to make the initial steps first. So cool, and you can do some weird stuff like kind of rig them up and to animate them to do other things. Can't show you this guy's face; he's a client. Right, and he looks a little bit like the Hulk or whatever, and that's fine. But what's more interesting is that we're actually able to capture Now, this is a company called 8i that we're working with. We're actually able to capture live moments as they happen in volumetric scale. So imagine the Heidelberg project, once it's finished and reported to virtual reality, instead of just seeing the art on the walls, you're seeing the art as it's being created. And future step, way past the horizon, maybe being able to interact with that artist and find out what their motivations were while they're creating the pieces of art. So, some final thoughts here. Um, okay, we're often drawn to the idea when we think about virtual reality, and for us as well as a company, when we think about creating virtual reality experiences for our clients, we want to create something that kind of evokes an image like this, right? Or something like this. But as the gatekeepers and the stewards of the technology through the content and experiences that we create, we should use our learnings through creating these experiences in order to fulfill on the needs of people like this and of people like this and of guys like they're all white. People like this. Right? Sorry. Uh, right, places, experiences that allow people to jump into new realities, but jump into places that they otherwise wouldn't have any accessibility to, be able to study in those places and be able to learn from the experiences of others in those spaces, right? So last thing I'd implore you to do is, yes, make these great other experiences for your clients and the people that are paying you to do it, but also share what you know out with the rest of the world, because right now we're still trying to make virtual reality a viable platform, but we can make it a viable platform for so many greater needs, some things that are bigger than ourselves. So thank you very much. That's that. That's me.